Loyalty, a word that binds men stronger than chains, yet cuts deeper than any blade when it snaps. On a day written in ash and shadow, the promise of protection became the script of betrayal, and history once again bled from the hands of those sworn to guard it. The calendar called it the Ides of March. But it was not the date that carried the curse. It was the silence before the storm, the whispers in marble halls, the trembling of oaths that had grown too heavy to hold. He was the ruler who walked like a storm, but spoke like calm water. To the people, he was both savior and executioner, a figure too vast to love without fear. To his friends, he was both emperor and man. And to those who stood too close, he was the sun that burned. It was in this delicate silence that they gathered, not enemies, but friends, men who once shared bread, victories, and the fire of empire, men who now whispered rebellion in the same breath they once swore allegiance. No tyrant fears the blade of his enemies. He fears the blade held by a friend, for the friend does not strike to conquer. He strikes to silence. The Senate was chosen as the stage, not because it was safe, but because betrayal demands witnesses. On the marble steps where laws were born, history would watch loyalty rot. He entered without a guard, as if fate itself bowed to him. The city was breathing, not in relief, not in joy, but like a beast waiting to pounce. He trusted them. Each face was a memory, of battles fought side by side, of campaigns carved into the skin of the earth. He did not see conspirators, he saw brothers, and in betrayal, time slows. Words stretch like shadows at dusk. Eyes meet, not as friends, not as enemies, but as history and its executioner. The first blade did not kill him. It simply broke the illusion. Steel kissed flesh, and trust shattered like porcelain on stone. And then the others followed, not as warriors, but as executioners of a promise they once swore to protect. One by one, they carved their names into history with the edge of a blade. There are wounds the body can endure, but betrayal is not of flesh, it is of the soul. And when it breaks, no empire can remain unshaken. In the Senate, marble absorbed what history would never forget. The man who built the empire fell, not before an army, but beneath the hands of friends. When the blade withdrew, it did not take the wound with it. It left a hole, in a man, in a nation, in time itself. Betrayal never ends where the blade falls. It lingers, in whispers, in glances, in the trembling hands that once saluted the sun. In that moment, they did not kill a man. They summoned an echo, one that would crawl through centuries, carving his name deeper with every retelling. History does not pause when blood cools. It watches, it waits, and then it begins to whisper. The conspirators thought they had slain a tyrant, but what they truly awakened was a storm that would not sleep. They called it an act of liberation, a cleansing of power, but no blade that tastes loyalty remains clean. The Senate, once their stage of justice, now smelled of iron and fear. For some, the act was a triumph. For others, it was already a wound they could not heal. Among them were voices trembling between pride and dread. One man whispered, "It is done." Another could not speak at all. They left the Senate not as victors, but as men carrying shadows on their backs. And the city, their city, looked at them not with gratitude, but with the hollow stare of a wound still bleeding. Power is a strange creature. It does not die with the man who holds it. It slips, it slithers, it finds new hands. And in the hours after his fall, the empire itself began to tremble, as if the ground had lost its heartbeat. He who falls in silence often speaks the loudest after death. The city whispered his name, as if afraid the air itself might punish them for forgetting. The conspirators believed the people would rise with them. Instead, the people rose against them. What was meant to be salvation felt like sacrilege. Statues draped in silence were now dressed in flowers and tears. And so, fear changed sides. Those who struck now became the hunted. Every shadow in the city stretched longer. Every whisper sounded like an accusation. The Senate that had bathed in power now bled from its own cracks. Rumors turned to threats. Alliances fractured like brittle clay. One by one, the men who struck together began to turn away from each other. It is the nature of betrayal, to consume not only the betrayed, but the betrayer. Some drowned in guilt, some in fear, some in the cold ambition that had led them here. And the people began to choose sides. Some whispered their names in reverence, others in disgust, but no one remained silent. The city had awoken, and it remembered. Funerals of rulers are rarely funerals at all. They are declarations. The day he was laid to rest, it was not mourning that filled the air. It was fire. A torch was thrown, not by a soldier, not by a friend, but by a nameless hand lost in the crowd. And in that moment, grief became flame. Flame became fury. The conspirators had spilled blood to prevent a crown from becoming eternal. But in fire, they forged the myth they feared most. His death did not end him, it crowned him. The city did not whisper anymore. It roared. It demanded vengeance. It demanded memory. And memory is sharper than any blade forged by man. And so, the blood they spilled became a crown they could never wear. The man they struck down now ruled them in absence, more powerful in death than in life. Fire dies, smoke fades, but history does not sleep. It lingers in the bones of cities. It lives in the hands that build after ruin. The Ides of March was not an ending. It was the beginning of a silence that screamed for centuries. The conspirators scattered like frightened birds. Some fled into the night. Others waited for mercy that would never come. They thought they had slain a man, but they had struck a legend. And legends do not bleed the way men do. One by one, they were hunted. Not by soldiers alone, by whispers, by memory, by the people who had once followed them. Betrayal does not create victors, only ghosts. In death, he became something larger than the Senate walls, larger than marble, larger than Rome itself. Empires fall to dust. But the idea of betrayal against greatness, that never fades. Some called it justice. Others called it murder. But time does not care for names. Time carves its own verdict in silence. And silence remembers. Centuries would pass. Thrones would rise. Crowns would change. But the Ides of March would not fade. It became a symbol, not of a single death, but of the weight that loyalty carries when it breaks. And in every throne room since, rulers have felt it, a quiet tremor in their bones, a reminder that no crown is heavy enough to stop the blade of a friend. The betrayal of a friend cuts deeper because it was once love, and every betrayal after it is only an echo of that night. The city rebuilt, the empire grew, but beneath its stones, the Ides of March slept like a buried blade, waiting to be remembered, and remember, it always would, from whispered warnings in royal chambers to stage plays echoing across time. His death became a mirror every leader is forced to look into, whether they wish to or not. Even now, the words of that night remain, cold as steel, spoken not in rage, but in heartbreak. A line etched into eternity, loyalty turned to blood, friendship to ruin, and history to warning. The Ides of March is not just a date, it is a question, one whispered into the ears of every throne that dares to rise. Empires are built on power, but they fall on trust. And when trust is broken, it does not just shatter one man, it shakes the world that believed in him. Centuries have passed, yet his shadow still lingers, not as a tyrant, not as a martyr, but as a reminder that the sharpest blades are forged in loyalty and drawn in silence. History still whispers, if we dare to listen.